Have you ever felt your world shatter at the mere whisper of an accusation, when everything you've worked for, fought for, crumbles into dust? Imagine being accused of something you would never do, something so dark, so devastating. It feels like you're drowning, and no one can hear you. For Clifton Powell, this wasn't just a nightmare. It was his reality. And for Hollywood, the shockwave has left a crater that no one can ignore. Is it the end of a career, or the beginning of a truth Hollywood never wanted you to see? Clifton Powell's name might not immediately ring a bell, but his face is unforgettable. For decades, he's been a constant presence in Hollywood, building a legacy one unforgettable role at a time. From Friday to Ray, Powell had become the actor you could always rely on, the one whose performance was impossible to forget. But behind the bright lights, beyond the red carpets, Powell's life had a darker side, a side that until now, few knew about. From the streets of Southeast D.C., where survival meant everything, Powell climbed his way to Hollywood. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. He fought his way out of the hardest circumstances, and in the end, he turned his pain into performances that moved audiences worldwide. A breakthrough role in Menace to Society launched him into the spotlight. But it wasn't until Friday and Ray that he cemented his place in Hollywood's upper ranks. Powell wasn't just a versatile actor, he was a living testament to what it took to survive in a world that often told him no. From gritty urban dramas to comedic gems, Powell showed Hollywood he could do it all. His talent was undeniable, but everything Powell had worked for would soon be threatened by something he couldn't control, an accusation that would forever change the trajectory of his career. In 2011, the storm began. A woman named Keontae Myers came forward with shocking claims that would hit Powell harder than any plot twist in a film, the kind of accusation that could ruin someone's life, no matter the truth behind it. How could a man who had clawed his way from the depths of adversity to become one of Hollywood's most reliable actors now find himself in the center of such a storm? Could the same man who brought so much to life on screen be reduced to a headline? The public didn't wait for the truth. They didn't ask questions. They simply judged. For Powell, the damage was immediate. The news spread like wildfire, and Hollywood watched as one of its brightest stars faced the possibility of losing everything. As the headlines blared, the world watched with bated breath. Clifton Powell, a name that once sparked excitement and admiration, now seemed to be falling into oblivion. The accusation wasn't just a rumor. It was a narrative that took root in the public's mind. In a world where reputation is everything, Powell was facing an uphill battle. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was perception. What mattered was the story the media was selling. The accusations came from Keontae Myers, who claimed that a hotel encounter with Powell in New Orleans had turned aggressive. The meeting, which she initially said was consensual, later turned into something far darker, according to her. When she allegedly asked him to stop, Powell ignored her request. From the moment the story hit the press, Powell's life was never the same. The immediate public reaction was a whirlwind of shock, disbelief, and judgment. But here's the truth. There was no criminal conviction. Powell denied the allegations from the start, and the investigation didn't turn up the evidence needed to bring any charges. It was a case that never should have gotten as far as it did. But once accusations like this enter the public eye, they leave a permanent mark. In Hollywood, where every day feels like an audition, a scandal of this magnitude can erase years of hard work, regardless of the truth. Powell's name was suddenly synonymous with suspicion. Roles started to disappear, casting agents turned cold, and producers became hesitant to work with him. The damage was swift and it was irreversible. How do you come back from that? Powell, who had once been on top of the world, now found himself watching from the sidelines. The opportunities he'd fought for, the roles that had made him a star, were slipping through his fingers. But what made this even worse wasn't just the loss of work, it was the toll it took on him personally. As a father, Powell's heart broke. His children, his family, had to endure the public scrutiny alongside him. He had built a life for them, a future, and now that future was uncertain. How could he shield them from the whispers, the judgment, the assumptions of guilt? He was being sentenced in the court of public opinion, and the jury was unforgiving. He wasn't just fighting to prove his innocence. He was fighting for his very identity. He was fighting to protect the man he knew himself to be from the darkness others had decided to cast on him. It wasn't just the roles that disappeared. It was the trust, the connections, the things Powell had worked so hard to build in Hollywood. And that was the hardest part. As the years dragged on, Powell fought not only the legal battle but also the emotional fallout. He was battling the erosion of his reputation, the loss of respect, and the painful realization that Hollywood wasn't as loyal as he had believed. He watched as colleagues and friends turned their backs, no longer willing to associate with a man whose name had become synonymous with scandal. Every phone call was met with hesitation. Every job offer came with conditions, if they came at all. He remembered a show he was working on where he was promised multiple episodes. But when the allegations surfaced, he was cut from the show after just 2 episodes. No explanation, no apology. The pain wasn't just financial. It wasn't just about losing jobs. It was about losing himself in the process. Powell recalled how, during this time, he found himself questioning everything he had worked for. He was fighting for his dignity, his legacy, his very identity. Hollywood wasn't a forgiving place. The world had already decided who he was, and that was enough to erase his entire career, even before the courts could say otherwise. But Powell wasn't giving up. He didn't just want to clear his name, he wanted to prove that he was more than the accusations. He wanted to show the world the man he truly was, the man behind the headlines. In 2017, the case was dismissed. The criminal charges were never upheld. The civil case, too, eventually fell apart. Powell was cleared. But here's the catch. The damage had already been done. He had already been sentenced in the court of public opinion. He had already paid the price. In a world where fame is fleeting and reputation is everything, Powell had to rebuild his career from the ground up. The legal victories were hollow without the chance to reclaim what had been lost. He had been through the ringer, and while he was free from the allegations, the scar on his reputation would never fully heal. What was the cost of these years lost to public opinion? What was the toll of a career nearly destroyed, of a man who had to fight for his dignity, his future, in a world that had already written him off? Powell wasn't just fighting to get back on screen. He was fighting to reclaim the life he had worked for. While the legal system had cleared Powell, Hollywood itself had not. Here's the painful truth. Reputation in this industry isn't just about being found innocent or guilty in court. It's about surviving a system that thrives on perception. And perception, once tarnished, can be impossible to cleanse. Clifton Powell, a man who had built a career over decades, who had proved himself time and time again in every genre, was now facing an entirely new battle, one against a Hollywood system that often chooses convenience over truth. And Powell wasn't just fighting for his roles, he was fighting against an industry that had made him a victim of its own biases. Hollywood, as we know it, isn't kind to those who fall from grace, but it's especially unkind to those who face 2 silent, insidious enemies: colorism and discrimination. Powell, a talented actor who had never been afraid to step into challenging roles, knew firsthand what it felt like to be overlooked, not for lack of skill, but because of the color of his skin. Over the years, he faced rejection after rejection, not because he couldn't act, but because he was told he was too dark. Hollywood, like much of society, had long upheld Eurocentric beauty standards, and for men like Powell, that meant roles in the spotlight were often out of reach. He wasn't just excluded from leading roles, he was excluded from stories where his humanity could be shown in all its depth. He could be the villain, the intimidating figure, the tough guy, but when it came to roles that demanded vulnerability, charm, or sensitivity, Powell was often told he didn't fit the mold. These were the barriers he fought against every day, barriers that no amount of talent could overcome. And it wasn't just Hollywood that was responsible. Powell was also disheartened by a harsh truth he had to face within his own community. He spoke openly about how the black entertainment world sometimes tore itself apart, criticizing and undermining each other publicly, weakening the very foundation of black artistry. He had seen it all, people trying to climb over each other, breaking the solidarity needed to overcome the industry's systemic issues. And yet, Powell never gave up. In his own way, he knew that the fight wasn't just for a career, it was for something deeper, something more profound. His struggles weren't just about race, they were about humanity, about being seen for who you are, not the roles you play or the labels others put on you. But amid the constant battles, against both the external forces of Hollywood and the internal battles of self-doubt, Powell found something unexpected: resilience. The man who once felt erased by public opinion discovered that he had something far stronger than fame. He had his truth. The turning point came when Powell embraced his own story. He had spent so many years trying to prove to the world who he wasn't, but now he was ready to show who he truly was. Powell wasn't defined by the headlines, the accusations, or the roles that Hollywood decided to give him. He was defined by the strength to rise above it all, to keep fighting when every inch of him wanted to surrender. This wasn't just about redemption for Powell, it was about a lesson for all of us. What do you do when the world gives up on you? What do you do when everything you've worked for is taken away by something beyond your control? You keep going. Powell didn't just recover from his downfall, he transformed. He rose, not just as an actor, but as a symbol of resilience, a testament to the fact that the human spirit can endure even the darkest of storms. In 2020, after years of setbacks, Powell returned to the industry with new vigor. He stepped into roles once again, not as the man defined by scandal, but as the actor who had been through the fire and emerged stronger. Hollywood may have tried to tear him down, but they underestimated one thing: they couldn't break him. It wasn't the courtroom's victory that defined Powell's comeback, it was the victory he found within himself. He had fought to hold on to his integrity, his identity, and his passion. And he found redemption not just in his work, but in his own eyes. As we look back on Powell's journey, it's clear: the fight isn't just about winning the battle, it's about owning your story. In a world that's quick to judge, quick to label, Powell taught us that no one can take your power unless you allow it. Through his struggles, Powell has shown that true victory doesn't come from outside validation, it comes from within. He had to prove that his life wasn't defined by mistakes, by gossip, by false narratives. He had to take back control of his own legacy, and in doing so, he gave us all a lesson in resilience. This story isn't just about Clifton Powell. It's about every person who's ever been judged too quickly, every person who's ever faced adversity, every person who's ever been underestimated. You are not defined by the opinions of others. You are not your mistakes. You are not the whispers behind your back. You are who you choose to be. And, like Powell, you can rise no matter what the world throws at you. Now it's your turn. What's holding you back from owning your own story? What's keeping you from rising above the challenges that have tried to define you? Remember, the only opinion that matters is the one you have of yourself. Take that first step today. Stop letting the world write your story for you. Start rewriting it on your terms. The journey may be tough, but like Clifton Powell, you can rise from the ashes, stronger, bolder, and ready for what comes next. If Powell can reclaim his narrative, so can you. Now is the time to take action. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're ready to keep moving forward, click the next video to continue your journey of transformation.